I ruined my online crush's life with one stupid click. The sentence left Julian Mercer's mouth at exactly 11:42 p.m. to an audience of 38,000 live viewers, and somehow that still wasn't the worst part of the night. The worst part came 3 seconds later when his streaming software froze, his second monitor lagged, and an unlabeled desktop folder accidentally opened in front of the entire internet. Julian didn't even realize what he'd done at first. He was too busy laughing at his own terrible joke, slouched sideways in his gaming chair with cold takeout noodles balanced on one knee and blue LED lights washing his apartment in electric shadows. Rain tapped softly against the windows behind him, while chat messages exploded faster than he could read them. "Guys," Julian wheezed, pushing messy blonde hair out of his eyes. "I swear I'm not obsessed with Adrian Vale. I'm just professionally interested in his face." The chat immediately flooded with skull emojis and accusations of lying. Typical. Adrian Vale was the internet's favorite mystery. A faceless content creator with millions of followers, a voice smooth enough to melt through headphones at 2 in the morning, and exactly 0 verified pictures online. People had spent years trying to figure out what he looked like. Entire Reddit threads were dedicated to analyzing reflections in his silver YouTube plaque. TikTok detectives zoomed into sunglasses lenses. One guy on Twitter claimed Adrian was secretly 3 different people sharing the same account. Julian knew all of this because, unfortunately, humiliatingly, tragically, he was one of Adrian's biggest fans. Not in a creepy way. Probably. Okay, maybe slightly creepy. But only emotionally. Open the secret folder, one chat message spammed. "Do it, Julian. Face reveal arc." "He's blushing." Julian snorted. "I'm not blushing. My room is hot because my landlord believes air conditioning is a privilege for the rich." More messages flew upward. Donations chimed. Someone sent $20 with the text, "Coward behavior." Julian narrowed his eyes dramatically. "You know what? Fine. There's nothing interesting in there anyway." Famous last words. He clicked the folder. For half a second, everything felt normal. Then the screen loaded. A video thumbnail filled the monitor. Adrian Vale. Not an avatar. Not fan art. Not a blurry convention photo. An actual video file. Julian stopped breathing. The room seemed to tilt sideways beneath him. Adrian sat in soft monitor light, dark hair falling over one eye, wearing a black hoodie with the hood pushed back slightly. He looked tired. Real. Beautiful in the kind of quiet way that made Julian's chest hurt unexpectedly hard. The file name underneath the video read, "don't_upload_final." MOV silence slammed into the stream. No donations. No laughing emojis. No keyboard clicking. Just 38,000 people staring at the same thing Julian was staring at. Then chat detonated. "Holy, is that him?" "Julian, what did you just show us?" Screenshotted. "No way this is real." Julian's blood turned to ice. No, 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 no. His mouse jerked violently as he tried closing the folder. The stream lagged instead. Of course it lagged. The cursed Wi-Fi that disconnected every time someone microwaved popcorn suddenly decided now was the perfect moment to die completely. The image stayed frozen on screen for 3 unbearable seconds. 3 seconds was all the internet needed. Julian finally slammed the monitor black, but the damage had already escaped into the world like shattered glass. His phone began vibrating instantly. Notifications stacked so fast the screen blurred. Twitter mentions. Discord pings. TikTok tags. His stream clip was already spreading. Someone in chat typed, #Adrian Vale face reveal. Another replied, "Bro, it's trending." Julian stared at the screen in horror. "I think I'm gonna throw up." He ended the stream without saying goodbye. The apartment dropped into suffocating silence. Rain rattled harder against the windows now, the city outside glowing wet neon blue beneath the storm. Julian sat frozen in his chair while his heartbeat hammered against his ribs hard enough to hurt. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. Julian almost ignored it. Almost. Something cold twisted low in his stomach as he answered carefully. "Hello." Silence. Soft breathing. Then a voice. Julian would have recognized anywhere in the world spoke low through the speaker. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous in a way that made Julian's entire body lock up. "Take the clip down," Adrian Vale said quietly. "Now." Julian forgot how to breathe after the call ended. He stayed frozen beside his desk with his phone still pressed against his ear while rainwater streaked silver down the apartment windows behind him. The disconnected line hummed softly for a second before silence swallowed everything whole again. Then his notifications exploded so violently the phone nearly slipped out of his hand. Messages flooded the screen faster than he could process them. Twitter mentions climbed into the thousands. Clips from the stream had already spread across every platform imaginable. Somebody had slowed down the footage frame by frame. Somebody else enhanced the image. One account posted side-by-side comparisons between Adrian Vale and random male models like internet detectives solving a murder case instead of ruining a stranger's privacy. Julian's stomach twisted painfully. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God, I actually did it." Another call came through instantly, this time from his manager, Chloe. He answered before the ringtone finished. "Please tell me that was fake," Chloe said without greeting. Julian laughed weakly, the sound cracking halfway through. "I would genuinely love for it to be fake." "Julian, I know. Do you understand what is happening online right now?" He rubbed both hands down his face. "I think the internet wants to kill me. Your hashtag has 6 million views." "Cool. That was sarcasm." "I figured." Chloe exhaled sharply. "Listen to me carefully. Do not post anything else tonight. Do not argue with people. Do not try to explain yourself while panicking. You cry too easily when you panic. That feels unnecessary to bring up." "Julian." "Right. Sorry." He slid down against the side of his desk until he was sitting on the floor surrounded by tangled charging cables and empty soda cans. The apartment suddenly felt much smaller than usual. Suffocatingly small. His streaming lights still glowed dim blue across the walls, making everything look unreal, like he had somehow stepped inside a nightmare version of his own bedroom. "I need to apologize," he muttered. "I need to fix this." Chloe hesitated. "You might not get the chance." Before Julian could ask what that meant, his apartment buzzer screamed downstairs. Both of them fell silent. Julian looked toward the front door instinctively. It was nearly midnight. Nobody visited him at midnight. The buzzer sounded again. Long, sharp. Impatient. "Tell me that is not him," Chloe said carefully. Julian stood too fast and nearly tripped over his chair. "There is literally no way Adrian Vale knows where I live." Another buzz. Longer this time. Then his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Open the door." Julian stopped breathing again. "Chloe," he whispered, "I think I am about to pass away. Do not die before renewing your sponsorship contracts." She replied automatically. "Call me later." The line disconnected. Julian stared at the front door for several seconds before finally forcing his legs to move. His heartbeat pounded louder with every step across the apartment. He unlocked the deadbolt carefully. The hallway outside looked empty at first beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. Then a tall figure stepped out from the shadows near the stairwell. Black hoodie, dark jeans damp from rain, silver rings catching dim light as one hand pushed back the hood slightly. Adrian Vale looked exactly like the leaked video, and somehow worse for Julian's emotional stability in person. More real, sharper around the edges. Exhausted in a painfully human way the internet had never seen before. Julian's throat went dry instantly. Adrian's eyes landed on him without hesitation. "Gray. Cold. Beautiful. Hi." Julian blurted out weakly. "That sounded stupid immediately after leaving my mouth." Adrian stared at him for one long, unreadable second. "Can I come inside?" Julian moved aside so quickly, he almost hit the wall. "Yes. Obviously. Sorry. Right." Adrian stepped into the apartment slowly, bringing rain and cold night air in with him. The room suddenly felt charged with dangerous electricity. Julian shut the door behind them with trembling fingers while Adrian quietly looked around the apartment. The streaming setup, the glowing monitors, the half-eaten noodles still sitting abandoned beside the keyboard. Evidence of the disaster everywhere. "I did not mean to leak your face," Julian said immediately. "I know saying that sounds useless right now, but I swear I would never intentionally hurt you. I am not that kind of person." Adrian remained silent. His wet hoodie clung slightly to broad shoulders as he crossed toward the dark monitor screens. Julian hated himself for noticing details like that during a crisis. Adrian finally spoke without turning around. "The clip already has 12 million views." Julian closed his eyes in horror. "Okay, cool. I mean not cool. Horrifying actually." Adrian looked back at him then. Tiredness shadowed the sharp lines beneath his eyes like he had not slept in days, even though the scandal had only started hours ago. "People are outside my building," he said quietly. "Someone followed my manager home tonight because they thought she was me." Julian's chest tightened painfully. "I am so sorry." "I know. That almost made it worse somehow." Adrian walked toward the apartment window and glanced carefully through the blinds at the rain-soaked street below. Julian moved closer instinctively before stopping himself. "Are there really people outside?" Adrian nodded once. "And now some of them know where you live too." Julian blinked. "What?" Adrian held up his phone. A photo filled the screen. Julian's apartment building. Posted online less than 5 minutes ago. Beneath it were thousands of comments. Some angry, some invasive, some terrifyingly excited. Julian felt all warmth leave his body. "Oh." Adrian slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Which is why," he said calmly, "until this dies down, you are not staying here alone." Julian stared at Adrian like his brain had completely stopped processing language correctly. Rain hammered harder against the apartment windows while distant sirens echoed somewhere below the building, blurred beneath the constant buzz of his still exploding phone notifications. "You cannot seriously mean that," Julian said finally. Adrian looked calm in the way. Hurricanes probably looked calm from space. "I do. You are a millionaire internet cryptid with stalkers." "That is a strange sentence. You are telling me you are staying here?" Adrian glanced toward the window again. "You are the one people are blaming right now." Julian laughed nervously. "Okay, but technically I deserve it a little." Adrian's expression sharpened immediately. "No." The word landed harder than Julian expected. Firm. Certain. Protective in a way that made heat crawl unexpectedly into his face. Adrian stepped closer to the couch and pulled his phone from his pocket again. The screen glowed cold blue across his features as he scrolled silently through social media posts. Julian caught glimpses of headlines moving rapidly down the display. Streamer exposes internet icon. Adrian Vale, face leak shocks fans. Cancelled Julian Mercer. His stomach twisted harder with every glance. "This is bad," he muttered weakly. Adrian looked up. "It will get worse before morning." "Cool. Awesome. Fantastic." Julian began pacing automatically, stepping over charging cables and abandoned hoodies while panic spiraled louder in his chest. "Maybe I should just disappear for a while. Like fake my death. Move to Canada. Become one of those men who builds furniture in the woods." Adrian watched him quietly for several seconds before speaking again. "You ramble when you are scared." Julian stopped pacing instantly. "What?" Adrian slid his phone back into his pocket. "You also tug your sleeves over your hands when you feel guilty." Julian looked down automatically. His sleeves were halfway covering his fingers. He blinked up at Adrian in confusion. "How do you know that?" Silence stretched for one dangerous second too long. Adrian looked away first. "I have watched your streams before." Julian laughed once in disbelief. "Before tonight." Adrian did not answer immediately, which somehow answered everything. The room suddenly felt too warm despite the rainstorm outside. Julian stared at him while his heartbeat started acting deeply embarrassing again. "Wait," he said slowly. "You watched me." Adrian leaned one shoulder lightly against the kitchen counter. "Sometimes." "Sometimes as in once." "No, sometimes as in a normal amount." Adrian remained silent. Julian pointed accusingly. That silence was suspicious. A faint smile almost touched Adrian's mouth before disappearing again. Tiny. Brief. Gone so quickly Julian nearly thought he imagined it. Then Adrian's phone vibrated sharply. His entire expression changed. Cold again instantly. He answered without hesitation. "What happened?" The voice on the other end sounded frantic even through the speaker distortion. Julian could not make out words clearly, only tension. Adrian listened silently for several seconds before rubbing a hand slowly across his jaw. Silver rings flashed beneath the kitchen light. "No," Adrian said finally. "Do not let anyone through the lobby." Another pause. His eyes shifted briefly toward Julian. "Especially reporters." The call ended. Julian crossed his arms uneasily. "How many people are outside?" Adrian stepped toward the window and pulled the blinds aside slightly. Julian moved beside him instinctively. Down below, flashing camera lights flickered through the rain like lightning. Several figures stood gathered near the entrance of the apartment building despite the weather. Someone held up a phone toward the windows above. Julian immediately stepped back. "Absolutely not." Adrian lowered the blinds again. My security team is downstairs. Julian blinked. You're what? Adrian hesitated. I normally do not use them publicly. You have a security team? Julian. Sorry. I am still adjusting to the fact that my internet crush apparently lives like a secret billionaire superhero. Adrian sighed softly. I am not your crush. Julian froze. Silence crashed into the apartment. Adrian looked at him immediately afterward like he regretted speaking. Julian's face burned alive. Right, he said too quickly. Obviously, because that would be humiliating information for me to reveal during this already horrifying evening. Adrian's gaze lingered on him for half a second longer than necessary. Then another vibration interrupted the moment. This time the notification came from Julian's own phone. He glanced down automatically and felt his stomach drop. Somebody had posted an old photo of him outside his apartment building from months ago. The comments underneath were vicious. Clout chaser. Obsessive freak. Attention seeker. Julian swallowed hard and locked the screen immediately. Adrian noticed anyway. Do not read them. Julian tried laughing again, but the sound came out thin. Unfortunately, my coping mechanism is making bad decisions. Adrian stepped closer before Julian fully realized what was happening. Not touching, just close enough for his voice to lower naturally. Then let me make one good decision for you tonight. Julian looked up slowly. Rainlight shimmered silver across Adrian's face while the city glowed behind him in blurred neon colors. Up close, Adrian looked exhausted in painfully human ways no filtered video could hide. There was a faint shadow beneath his eyes. Damp strands of dark hair curled slightly near his forehead from the rain. Julian's chest tightened unexpectedly hard. What decision? He asked quietly. Adrian reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a black baseball cap. Then he handed it to Julian. You are coming with me. Where? Somewhere nobody can reach you. Julian stared at the cap in confusion before noticing something else on Adrian's hand as the sleeve shifted upward slightly. A silver signet ring. Heavy. Elegant. Engraved with a crest Julian did not recognize. Definitely not something a normal streamer wore casually at midnight. Adrian caught him staring and immediately tugged the sleeve back down. Too late. Julian's curiosity sparked instantly. But before he could ask about it, headlights swept suddenly across the apartment's ceiling from outside. Then came shouting from downstairs. Adrian's expression darkened. They found your floor. Julian's entire body went cold. More voices echoed faintly from the hallway outside now, muffled through the apartment door, but unmistakably real. Someone laughed. Another voice said his name. Camera shutters clicked somewhere beyond the walls like distant static. Nope, Julian whispered immediately. Absolutely not. I am too emotionally fragile for this. Adrian was already moving. Calm. Fast. Controlled. He crossed the apartment. Without wasting a second and switched off the glowing streaming lights one by one until the room fell into dim gray shadows lit only by rain and city neon leaking through the curtains. Grab your phone and a jacket, Adrian said quietly. Julian blinked at him. You sound disturbingly experienced at escaping mobs. Unfortunately, another shout came from outside the hallway. Closer now. Julian's stomach twisted hard enough to hurt. His phone vibrated again with another flood of notifications. One message preview flashed across the screen before he could stop himself from reading it. You ruin everything you touch. He locked the phone immediately. Adrian noticed anyway. Of course he noticed. Adrian noticed everything. Do not look at them, he said softly. Julian shoved the phone into his hoodie pocket with trembling fingers. I am trying very hard to become a better person right now. Adrian opened the apartment door carefully and glanced down the hallway. Come on. Julian followed him out immediately. The hallway lights flickered overhead while rain battered the windows near the stairwell. Somewhere below them, the building lobby buzzed with raised voices. Julian pulled the baseball cap lower over his face instinctively. This is insane, he whispered while they hurried toward the stairs. 12 hours ago, I was eating microwave noodles and arguing with chat about whether cereal counts as soup. Adrian glanced back briefly. It does not. Julian stared at him. You answered that suspiciously fast. Another almost smile touched Adrian's mouth. Tiny again. Barely there. Somehow even that small expression made Julian's pulse stumble embarrassingly hard. They reached the stairwell just as Julian's phone rang loudly through the silence. He flinched so violently he nearly dropped it. Adrian steadied him automatically with one hand against his elbow. Warm fingers. Gentle pressure. Gone too quickly. Julian looked down at the caller ID and groaned aloud. Oh no. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. Who is it? My ex-boyfriend. Adrian went very still for half a second. Answer it. Julian blinked. Why? Because if he is calling now, he probably wants something. Unfortunately, Adrian was right. Julian accepted the call reluctantly and put it on speaker while they continued down the stairs. Trevor, he said tiredly. Now is genuinely the worst possible time. Trevor laughed softly through the speaker. Funny. The internet seems to think this is the best time of your career. Julian closed his eyes immediately. Trevor always sounded like that when he wanted attention. Smooth. Smug. Exhausting. What do you want? I wanted to check if the rumors are true, Trevor said lightly. Did you really leak Adrian Vale on purpose for clout? Julian stopped walking. Adrian stopped too beside him in the dim stairwell. I did not do it on purpose. Come on, Julian. You have always been obsessed with famous people noticing you. The words hit harder than Julian expected. Old embarrassment curled cold inside his chest. Trevor continued before Julian could answer. Honestly, this whole thing feels desperate even for you. Silence stretched painfully between them. Julian hated that Adrian was hearing this. Hated it. Trevor had always known exactly where to press to make him feel small. You used to beg me to post you online, Trevor added casually. Remember that? Julian swallowed hard. That is enough. Did Adrian finally give you the attention you wanted? Adrian reached over quietly and took the phone from Julian's hand before he could react. His expression remained perfectly calm, almost emotionless, which somehow felt far more dangerous than anger. Trevor, Adrian said evenly. Silence exploded on the other end of the call. Wait, Trevor said finally. Holy hell. Is that actually him? Adrian ignored the question completely. You will not contact Julian again. Trevor laughed nervously. Look, man, I was just joking around. No, Adrian replied softly. You were trying to humiliate him because you thought nobody would stop you. Julian's breath caught unexpectedly. Rain hammered against the stairwell windows while Adrian stood there in dim silver light, looking terrifyingly composed. I am stopping you now, Adrian continued. Lose this number. Then he ended the call. Julian stared at him speechlessly. Adrian handed the phone back like nothing unusual had happened. You did not have to do that, Julian said quietly. Yes, Adrian replied immediately. I did. Something warm and painful twisted beneath Julian's ribs before he could stop it. They reached the underground parking garage moments later. Black SUVs waited near the elevators with headlights glowing softly against polished concrete. Two men in dark suits stood nearby, speaking urgently into earpieces. Julian slowed instantly. Okay, he whispered. That is definitely rich people behavior. Adrian ignored that completely and guided Julian toward the nearest vehicle. One of the security guards opened the back door immediately. But before Julian climbed inside, another voice suddenly echoed through the garage. Adrian. Both of them turned. A sharply dressed man stepped out from the shadows near the elevators holding a phone in one hand and looking deeply irritated. Expensive coat. Perfect hair. Cold eyes. The board is furious, the stranger said. Your father has been calling nonstop. Julian blinked in confusion. Father? Adrian's entire expression hardened instantly. Not now, Lucien. Lucien's gaze shifted toward Julian slowly. Calculating. Disapproving. So this is the streamer who caused all this. Julian felt embarrassment crawl hot across his face. Adrian stepped subtly closer beside him before Lucien could say anything else. Small movement. Protective movement. Impossible not to notice. Watch your tone, Adrian said calmly. Lucien looked startled for half a second before masking it quickly. Then his eyes dropped briefly toward Adrian's hand, where the silver signet ring glinted beneath the garage lights. You are wearing the family ring again, Lucien murmured carefully. Julian's curiosity flared instantly. Family ring. Before he could ask, Adrian opened the SUV door himself and looked directly at Julian. Get in, he said quietly. I will explain everything on the way. The inside of the SUV smelled faintly like cedarwood and rain. Soft amber lights glowed along the ceiling while the city blurred outside the tinted windows in streaks of silver and neon blue. Julian sat stiffly against the leather seat with his backpack. clutched awkwardly in his lap like emotional support luggage while Adrian spoke quietly with the driver through the privacy divider. Everything about this night felt unreal now. 12 hours ago, he had been live streaming in sweatpants. Now he was apparently being escorted across the city by private security because he accidentally exposed the face of the internet's most mysterious man. His phone buzzed again, then continuously without stopping. Julian finally silenced it completely and leaned his head back against the seat with a tired groan. I think my nervous system has permanently left my body. Adrian glanced toward him from across the SUV. You should sleep for a few hours when we arrive. Julian laughed weakly. I do not think my anxiety will allow that. Silence settled briefly between them while rain traced soft lines across the dark windows. Adrian looked different away from the glow of computer screens. More dangerous somehow. Sharper. The silver signet ring still glinted faintly against his hand where it rested near his knee. Impossible for Julian to stop noticing now. So, Julian said carefully after a minute. How rich are you exactly? Adrian blinked once. That is your question? You have security guards, mysterious family drama, and a ring that looks like it belongs to a vampire prince. Julian crossed his arms. I feel like I deserve at least one explanation. Adrian looked out the window for a second before answering quietly. My family owns Vale Media Group. Julian frowned slightly. Wait. Adrian remained calm. Too calm. The Vale Media Group? Yes. Julian stared at him in complete silence. Vale Media Group was not just some random company. They owned streaming platforms, music labels, production studios, half the entertainment websites Julian used daily, and apparently several buildings downtown, because of course they did. No, Julian said immediately. Absolutely not. Adrian's brow lifted slightly. No. You are telling me that the faceless internet creator I accidentally exposed is secretly the heir to one of the largest media companies in the country? Adrian did not answer, which unfortunately answered everything. Julian laughed once in disbelief. Oh my God. He suddenly remembered every late-night stream where Adrian acted awkwardly about sponsorships. Every interview he refused. Every vanished public appearance. Every mystery. You are not just some private influencer, Julian said slowly. You are literally corporate royalty. Adrian's jaw tightened faintly at the wording. I do not use my family name online. Clearly, Julian looked away toward the rain streaking across the windows. Something strange and uncomfortable twisted beneath his ribs now. Not panic this time. Something sharper. You lied to everyone. Adrian's expression shifted carefully. I never told anyone who I was. That is not the same thing. Julian's voice came out quieter than intended. You let millions of people trust this version of you while hiding something enormous. Adrian watched him silently for a moment. I had reasons. I am sure billionaire families usually do. The second the words left his mouth, Julian regretted them. Adrian's eyes darkened slightly before he looked away toward the front windshield. Silence stretched heavy through the SUV. Julian rubbed tiredly at his face. Sorry, that was unfair. No, Adrian said softly. It was honest. That somehow made Julian feel worse. The vehicle slowed smoothly before turning into a private underground entrance beneath a massive downtown building wrapped in mirrored glass. Security gates opened automatically. Julian stared upward through the window. Please do not tell me you live in a skyscraper too. Adrian remained quiet again. You do. Julian whispered in betrayal. The SUV parked inside a private garage lined with black luxury vehicles that probably cost more than Julian's entire apartment building. One of the guards stepped out immediately to open Adrian's door. Julian stayed frozen inside the car for an extra second, while reality continued emotionally attacking him from every direction. Adrian paused beside the open door and looked back toward him. Julian, I just need a moment to process the fact that my internet crush turned out to be Bruce Wayne. Adrian's expression flickered dangerously close to amused before disappearing. Again, come upstairs. Julian followed reluctantly through a private elevator wrapped in dark marble and soft gold lighting. Everything felt painfully elegant. Even the silence sounded expensive somehow. When the elevator doors finally opened, Julian stepped into a penthouse large enough to qualify as its own zip code. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the storm-soaked city skyline, while warm ambient lights reflected softly across polished black stone floors. Somewhere deeper inside the penthouse, music played quietly through hidden speakers. Julian turned slowly in disbelief. You live like this? Adrian loosened his hoodie slightly and finally looked exhausted instead of untouchable. Usually it feels emptier. The honesty in that sentence caught Julian off guard for half a second before another voice suddenly interrupted from across the room. So this is him. Julian looked up sharply. A woman stood near the massive fireplace holding a wine glass in one hand and a tablet in the other. Elegant silver dress. Cold eyes. Perfect posture. She looked like she had been born judging people professionally. Mother, Adrian said flatly. Julian's stomach immediately dropped. Oh no. She looked Julian over slowly from head to toe before setting the tablet down on the marble counter nearby. The internet disaster, she said calmly. You certainly caused enough damage for one evening. Julian's face burned instantly. I did not mean to expose him. Intent rarely matters in this family. Adrian's expression hardened immediately. That is enough. His mother looked mildly surprised by the sharpness in his tone. Adrian stepped subtly closer beside Julian without touching him directly. Protective again. Quietly protective. He is staying here as my guest. Adrian continued evenly. Nobody speaks to him like that. Julian looked up at him automatically. Adrian did not glance away from his mother once. The tension in the room sharpened like glass. Then his mother's gaze dropped slowly toward the silver signet ring on Adrian's hand before rising back to his face again. Interesting, she murmured softly. You only wear that ring when you have already made a decision. Julian frowned slightly. Decision? Before he could ask, Adrian looked toward him instead. Calm. Controlled. Beautifully unreadable. There is something else you need to know, he said quietly. The board wants me to make a public statement tomorrow. Julian swallowed hard. About the scandal? Adrian held his gaze steadily. About us. Julian stared at Adrian like the floor had disappeared beneath him again. The city lights shimmered through the penthouse windows behind them, blurred gold and blue against the rain, while tension settled heavy through the enormous room. Us, Julian repeated carefully. Adrian's mother lifted her wine glass with quiet elegance. The board believes a relationship scandal will distract the public from the leak itself. Julian blinked once. You want us to fake date our way through a corporate crisis? Temporary public appearances, she corrected smoothly. A controlled narrative. People are far more forgiving when romance is involved. Julian laughed softly in disbelief. That is deeply insane. Adrian's gaze never left him. You can say no. The answer came too quickly. No silence. Julian rubbed both hands over his face immediately afterward. I mean yes. Wait. I mean I do not know. Adrian's mother looked mildly unimpressed. Charming. I am emotionally exhausted, Julian muttered. Please allow me one confusing sentence every 10 minutes. Adrian's expression softened almost invisibly before he looked back toward his mother. Leave us alone for tonight. She studied him carefully for a second too long. Then her eyes flicked briefly toward Julian again. Assessing. Measuring. Very well, she said calmly. But the press conference is tomorrow afternoon. By morning the internet will already assume you are involved romantically. Julian nearly choked. Why would they assume that? Adrian's mother raised one elegant brow. Because my son crossed the city in the middle of a media disaster to personally retrieve you from paparazzi. She smiled faintly. People notice things. Then she disappeared deeper into the penthouse, leaving silence behind her like expensive perfume. Julian stood motionless for several seconds after she left. I think your family terrifies me. Adrian exhaled quietly and loosened the collar of his hoodie slightly. That is a normal reaction. The honesty in his voice surprised Julian enough to glance back at him. Adrian looked tired again now that his mother was gone. Not cold, just worn down in ways expensive suits and security guards could not hide. Julian suddenly realized Adrian had probably been handling chaos nonstop since the leak happened. The internet exploding. Reporters. Family pressure. Corporate boards. And somehow he still came personally to protect Julian first. The realization settled warm and uncomfortable inside his chest. Hey, Julian said quietly. Adrian looked up immediately. Have you eaten anything today? Adrian blinked once like the question caught him off guard. That is not important. That means no. Julian pointed toward the massive kitchen. Okay, rich boy trauma can wait 15 minutes. You need food. Adrian looked genuinely confused now. You are trying to cook for me? I survived college on instant ramen and emotional instability. Julian informed him seriously while walking toward the kitchen. Trust the process. To Julian's surprise, Adrian actually followed him. The kitchen looked like something from an architectural magazine. Marble countertops, gold fixtures, soft under-cabinet lighting glowing warm against polished black stone. Julian opened the refrigerator and immediately froze. Your fridge is organized by color. Adrian leaned quietly against the counter nearby. The house staff does that. You have house staff? Julian. Sorry. I keep discovering new levels of your secret billionaire life. Adrian's mouth twitched faintly again. Tiny. Dangerous. Julian focused aggressively on sandwich ingredients before his heartbeat embarrassed him further. You know, he muttered while grabbing bread. I used to think your mysterious online persona was because you were socially awkward. Adrian folded his arms loosely. And now? Julian glanced at him briefly. Now I think you are hiding from this entire world. Silence followed. Heavy this time. Real. Adrian looked down toward the marble counter instead of answering immediately. When people know who you are, he said quietly, they stop treating you normally. Julian slowed slightly while spreading mustard onto bread. Adrian's voice remained calm, but something lonely moved beneath it. Every conversation becomes about what they can gain from you. Every relationship becomes conditional. He looked toward the rain outside the windows. The internet was the only place I ever felt anonymous. Julian's chest tightened unexpectedly hard. Adrian continued softly. Online, people listened to my voice before my last name. That is why you never showed your face, Julian realized. Adrian nodded once. My family wanted me visible, public, controlled. His eyes darkened slightly. I wanted one thing that belonged only to me. Julian looked at him quietly across the warm kitchen light. Suddenly Adrian Vale did not feel untouchable anymore. Just lonely. Painfully lonely. Julian handed him a plate a few minutes later. Adrian stared down at the sandwich like nobody had ever made him one before. It is not fancy, Julian warned. But emotionally, it has excellent reviews. Adrian looked up at him slowly. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Soft. Real. Barely louder than the rain outside. Julian's stomach flipped immediately. Oh no. Adrian taking one tired, genuine laugh directly to the face should not have affected him this much. You are strange, Adrian murmured. That is what my elementary school teachers said too. Adrian sat at the kitchen island finally eating while Julian leaned against the opposite counter sipping bottled water. The penthouse felt quieter now. Safer somehow. Like the storm outside could not quite reach them here. Then Adrian's phone buzzed sharply against the marble countertop. His expression changed instantly after reading the message. Julian noticed immediately. What happened? Adrian hesitated. Someone leaked your home address online. Julian's stomach dropped. What? Adrian stood immediately, already reaching for his coat again. Calm. Focused. Protective. Your building manager says reporters are surrounding the entrance now. Julian swallowed hard. I cannot go back there. I know. Adrian stepped closer before Julian. Could spiral further into panic. Look at me. Julian did automatically. Adrian's voice lowered gently. You are staying here tonight. Something about the certainty in that sentence made Julian's chest ache unexpectedly. Your family already hates me. Adrian's eyes softened slightly beneath the warm kitchen light. Julian. His voice dropped quieter. More honest than before. You are the first person I invited here because I wanted to. Julian did not sleep. He tried. Technically, Adrian had given him one of the guest rooms overlooking the rain-soaked skyline, complete with soft gray blankets and windows bigger than Julian's entire apartment kitchen. But every time he closed his eyes, his brain replayed the same horrifying sequence over and over again. The leaked video, the screaming chat, Adrian's voice on the phone, the internet tearing both of them apart in real time. Around 4 a.m, Julian finally gave up and wandered barefoot into the penthouse kitchen wearing one of Adrian's oversized hoodies that someone from the house staff had quietly left outside his room. The fabric still smelled faintly like cedarwood and expensive laundry detergent, which honestly felt emotionally dangerous. The penthouse was silent except for rain tapping softly against the windows and the distant hum of the city below. Julian opened the refrigerator aimlessly before realizing someone was already sitting in the dark living room beyond the kitchen. Adrian. Of course. He sat near the windows with his sleeves rolled slightly back, one hand resting against his mouth, while glowing tablet screens reflected cold blue light across his tired face. Financial reports, news articles, endless headlines. Julian hesitated before walking closer. Do rich people ever sleep? Adrian glanced up immediately. Do streamers? Fair. Julian settled carefully onto the opposite end of the couch. You should not be working at 4 in the morning. Adrian looked back toward the tablet. The board wants damage control plans finalized before sunrise. Julian frowned slightly. Because of me. Adrian's expression tightened instantly. Because of the situation. The correction should not have mattered as much as it did. Silence settled softly between them while rain streaked silver against the enormous windows. Julian curled deeper into the hoodie, sleeves unconsciously. Your hoodie is comfortable, he admitted quietly. Adrian looked at him for one dangerous second too long before looking away again. Keep it. Julian's pulse stumbled embarrassingly hard. Before he could say anything else, Adrian's tablet buzzed sharply against the glass coffee table. Adrian picked it up immediately, then went completely still. Julian noticed at once. What happened? Adrian did not answer. Which was worse? Julian shifted closer automatically. Adrian. Slowly, Adrian turned the tablet screen toward him. Julian's stomach dropped instantly. A headline stretched across the screen in massive bold letters. Leaked contract reveals streamer planned relationship scandal with Adrian Vale. Underneath it sat blurry screenshots. Fake screenshots. But terrifyingly convincing fake screenshots. Messages supposedly between Julian and a talent manager discussing using Adrian Vale for exposure. A fabricated payment agreement promising millions after the scandal boosted engagement numbers. And worst of all, edited photos from tonight showing Julian entering Adrian's SUV beneath flashing paparazzi cameras. The internet had already decided the story was real. Comments flooded beneath the article faster than Julian could process them. Gold digger. Manipulator. He planned everything. Julian felt cold all over. I did not write any of this. Adrian stayed silent. Julian looked at him sharply. Adrian. Still nothing. The silence stretched. 1 second. 2. 5. Long enough for panic to start clawing painfully up Julian's throat. You do not actually think I planned this, Julian said quietly. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. The screenshots are fabricated. But Adrian looked exhausted suddenly. More exhausted than Julian had ever seen him. The board already believes them. Julian stared at him in disbelief. Something sharp cracked painfully inside his chest. So your family thinks I targeted you on purpose. Adrian remained silent again. That hurt more than Julian expected. Much more. Julian stood abruptly from the couch and stepped away before Adrian could see how badly the silence affected him. Wow. He laughed softly, though the sound came out uneven. Okay. Adrian rose immediately. Julian. No, it is fine. Julian crossed both arms tightly across his chest. Actually, this makes perfect sense. The weird streamer accidentally leaks a billionaire heir and suddenly gets invited into the penthouse. Yeah. Honestly, I would think I was suspicious too. I never said that. You did not defend me either. The words landed hard between them. Adrian looked like he wanted to say something immediately after, but Julian kept going before he could. I knew this would happen eventually. Julian stared toward the rain-soaked windows instead of at him now. People like me do not survive in your world without everyone assuming we want something. Adrian took a step closer. Julian, do you know what the comments are saying now? Julian laughed weakly again. They think I orchestrated this entire disaster because I wanted fame. Because obviously some broke streamer could never genuinely care about someone like Adrian Vale unless there was money involved. Adrian's voice lowered carefully. I do not think that. Then why did you go quiet? Silence again. Tiny. Brief. Painful. Julian swallowed hard. Exactly. Adrian's expression finally cracked slightly then. Not anger. Hurt. Real hurt. But Julian was too emotionally raw to process it clearly anymore. His phone suddenly buzzed violently across the coffee table. Then Adrian's. Then another security alert chimed from somewhere deeper in the penthouse. Adrian grabbed his phone immediately, eyes darkening as he read the screen. The article spread faster than expected, he said quietly. Julian laughed hollowly. Cool. Love that for me. Then his own phone lit up again with a notification preview from Trevor. Guess your billionaire boyfriend dropped you fast. Julian locked the screen instantly, but Adrian had already seen enough to understand. The room felt colder now somehow despite the soft, warm lighting around them. Julian stepped backward slightly, creating distance without fully meaning to. Adrian noticed that too. Of course he did. Julian, Adrian said softly this time. Careful now. Almost uncertain. Look at me. Julian shook his head once. I think I should leave. Adrian's expression changed immediately. No, your family already hates me. The internet thinks I manipulated you. Your board wants me gone. Julian forced a weak smile that hurt around the edges. Honestly, I think everybody would be happier if I disappeared before your press conference. Adrian moved toward him again. Faster this time. Do not say that. But before Julian could answer, a massive notification suddenly appeared across every screen in the penthouse at once. Breaking news. Adrian Vale to address relationship fraud allegations live at noon. Julian's stomach dropped completely. Relationship fraud allegations. The words echoed painfully through the silent room while Adrian stared at the screens with unreadable eyes. And for one terrifying second, Julian genuinely wondered if Adrian was about to let the entire world believe he was a liar. By noon, the internet had fully turned Julian Mercer into public enemy number one. Every screen inside Adrian's penthouse flashed non-stop headlines while millions of comments flooded social media faster than anyone could moderate them. Gold digger, manipulator, clout chaser, professional liar. Somebody even edited Julian's old stream clips together into a fake mastermind compilation with dramatic music underneath. Julian sat motionless near the edge of the massive living room couch, wearing borrowed clothes and exhaustion beneath his eyes, while stylists and public relations teams moved quickly around the penthouse preparing Adrian for the live press conference downstairs. Nobody spoke directly to Julian anymore. Not after the fake contract leaked. Not after the board decided silence was safer. The worst part was Adrian himself. He had barely spoken for the last hour. Not cold exactly. Just focused in a frighteningly calm way while lawyers handed him tablets and executives whispered urgently near the windows. Julian watched him from across the room, feeling more out of place by the second. Maybe this was the moment reality finally won. Adrian Vale belonged to a world of private elevators and billion-dollar companies and perfectly controlled public images. Julian belonged to instant noodles and live-stream disasters and emotional breakdowns on the internet at 1 a.m. The distance between those worlds suddenly felt impossible. One of the executives glanced toward Julian with obvious irritation before leaning closer to Adrian. If you publicly distance yourself now, the man murmured carefully, the stock drop should stabilize by tonight. Julian looked away immediately before Adrian could notice the embarrassment on his face. There it was. The truth. Temporary crisis. Temporary protection. Temporary feelings. Julian stood quietly from the couch before anyone could stop him. Nobody noticed at first. They were all too focused on damage control. He slipped toward the hallway leading to the guest rooms, already pulling out his phone to order a rideshare somewhere far away from this nightmare. Where are you going? Adrian's voice cut through the room instantly. Julian froze. Everyone else went silent too. Julian turned slowly. Adrian stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows in a black tailored suit that somehow made him look even more untouchable than before. The silver signet ring gleamed against his hand beneath the soft penthouse lights. You do not need me down there, Julian said quietly. Adrian stared at him for one long second. Yes, he replied calmly. I do. Before Julian could answer, another executive stepped forward impatiently. Adrian, this is exactly the problem. People already think he orchestrated the scandal. Adrian did not even glance at the man. I know. Then why is he still here? The room went completely silent. Adrian finally looked away from Julian then. Slowly, deliberately, toward the executive instead. Because I asked him to stay. The temperature in the room seemed to shift instantly. The executive blinked. Sir, with respect. No, Adrian's voice remained soft. Controlled. Somehow that made it hit harder. You do not get to speak about him like he is disposable. Julian's breath caught slightly. Adrian stepped away from the windows and crossed the room toward him while every lawyer and assistant watched in stunned silence. The fabricated contract was traced 30 minutes ago, Adrian said calmly. It originated from a private marketing server owned by Trevor Lawson. Julian stared at him in disbelief. Trevor? Adrian nodded once. Your ex-boyfriend sold falsified screenshots to several media outlets at 8:20 this morning. The room exploded into shocked whispers instantly. Julian felt sick. Why would he do that? Adrian's eyes darkened slightly. Because he thought public humiliation would push you back toward him. Julian's stomach twisted painfully. Of course Trevor would do something cruel when ignored. Of course. Adrian continued evenly. My legal team already recovered the original files and metadata. One of the lawyers nearby immediately handed Adrian a tablet displaying side-by-side forensic comparisons proving the screenshots had been manipulated. Timestamps altered. Messages edited. Payment records fabricated. Perfect evidence. Clear evidence. Julian stared at the screen speechlessly. You already knew this? Adrian looked at him directly. Since 7 this morning. Hurt flashed hot through Julian instantly. Then why did you let me think you believed it? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Silence crashed heavily across the penthouse again. Adrian's expression finally shifted then. Real emotion cracking through the calm mask for the first time all day. Because I was angry, he admitted quietly. Julian blinked. Adrian's voice lowered slightly. Not at you. At myself. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed too loudly. Adrian looked exhausted suddenly. Human again instead of untouchable. I spent years hiding my life because I thought distance kept people safe, he said softly. Then the first person I genuinely wanted close to me became a target because of it. Julian's chest tightened painfully. Adrian stepped closer until only inches separated them now beneath the staring eyes of executives and lawyers and security guards. I should have defended you immediately, Adrian continued quietly. I was too busy trying to control the fallout instead of protecting the person standing in front of me. The room stayed silent. Completely silent. Julian looked up slowly. Adrian's gray eyes held his steadily now without hesitation. Honest. Open. Dangerous in an entirely different way than before. Then Adrian turned toward the waiting cameras positioned near the penthouse conference area for the live broadcast downstairs. Prepare the feed, he said calmly. Panic immediately spread through the executives. Adrian, wait, no edits. Adrian continued without looking away from Julian. No approved statements. The board will never allow that. Adrian slid the silver signet ring slowly from his finger and placed it onto the marble table beside him with a quiet metallic sound that silenced the entire room instantly. Even the executives looked shocked. Julian frowned slightly. What does that mean? Adrian's voice remained calm. It means they no longer control this decision. Then he reached for Julian's hand in front of everyone. Warm fingers wrapping carefully around trembling ones. Gasps sounded immediately across the room as cameras powered on. The red livestream light blinked alive. Millions of viewers connected within seconds. Adrian never let go of Julian's hand once. You all wanted the truth, Adrian said directly into the cameras. Calm. Elegant. Absolute. So here it is. Julian Mercer did not manipulate me. He did not target me. And he certainly did not leak my identity for fame. The livestream comments exploded instantly across nearby monitors. Adrian ignored all of them. The relationship rumors started as a strategy suggested by my board, he admitted evenly. At first, it was meant to protect my company. Julian's breath caught painfully. Then Adrian looked toward him instead of the cameras. Softly now. Honestly. But somewhere between protecting him from the internet and listening to him make terrible sandwiches at 4 in the morning, it stopped feeling fake to me. Silence. Absolute silence. Julian's heartbeat slammed wildly against his ribs. Adrian squeezed his hand gently once before looking back toward the cameras. If you want someone to blame for this situation, he said calmly, blame me for choosing him publicly anyway. The internet crashed for approximately 12 straight hours after Adrian Vale chose Julian Mercer publicly on live television. News channels replayed the confession nonstop. Social media flooded with slowed-down clips of Adrian taking Julian's hand in front of millions of viewers. Comment sections that once demanded Julian disappear suddenly turned into edits, reaction videos, and emotional essays about the billionaire recluse who folded for one chaotic streamer. Somebody even made a compilation titled Adrian Vale looking at Julian Mercer like he hung the moon, and somehow it reached 3 million views overnight. Julian found out about that one because Chloe texted it to him at 6 in the morning with 14 crying emojis and the message, You accidentally won capitalism. Unfortunately, none of that changed the fact that Julian still woke up the next morning emotionally confused beyond repair. He stood barefoot in Adrian's kitchen again, wearing the same oversized hoodie while sunlight spilled gold across the penthouse windows for the first time since the storm began. The city below looked washed clean after the rain. Quiet, bright, new. Julian stared blankly into a mug of coffee while his brain replayed the livestream confession for the 700th time. It stopped feeling real around hour 3. Footsteps sounded softly behind him. Julian looked up automatically. Adrian had changed out of the black suit from yesterday into a simple dark sweater and loose gray slacks. But somehow he still looked unfairly elegant standing in morning sunlight. His dark hair was slightly messy now, like he had finally slept for a few hours. Julian's chest tightened annoyingly fast at the sight. Adrian paused near the kitchen island. "You are awake early." Julian snorted softly. "The internet made a 40-minute analysis video about your eye contact with me." Adrian looked genuinely puzzled. 40 minutes? Apparently your face has become public property now. Adrian's expression softened slightly. "I suppose that is my fault." Silence settled between them comfortably this time instead of painfully. Julian realized with strange surprise that this might be the first quiet moment they had shared without panic clawing at his ribs. No screaming headlines. No paparazzi outside the windows. No fake contracts. Just morning light and coffee and Adrian standing a few feet away looking at him carefully like he mattered. The realization made Julian suddenly nervous all over again. About yesterday, Julian started awkwardly. Adrian immediately set his phone aside. "Full attention. I meant what I said." Julian blinked once. Adrian stepped closer slowly, warm sunlight catching faint silver in his eyes. None of it was for the cameras. Julian looked down at the coffee cup in his hands because maintaining eye contact suddenly felt medically dangerous. "You realize I have no idea how to exist in your world, right?" Adrian's voice lowered gently. "Neither do I most days." Julian laughed quietly at that. Then Adrian reached into his pocket and placed something carefully onto the kitchen counter between them. The silver signet ring. Julian looked up in surprise. "Your family ring?" Adrian nodded once. "My grandfather gave it to the next heir of Vale Media every generation." Julian frowned slightly. "Why are you showing me this?" Adrian rested one hand lightly against the marble countertop. "Because yesterday was the first time I ever took it off publicly." Julian stared at the ring beneath the sunlight. Heavy silver. Elegant crest engraved into the surface. Legacy. Pressure. Expectations. Your family looked ready to combust when you did that. Adrian's mouth twitched faintly. "Probably." Then his expression softened again. Honest this time. Vulnerable in a way Julian had never seen before. "I spent most of my life doing exactly what everyone expected from me," Adrian admitted quietly. "Perfect interviews. Perfect appearances. Perfect silence." He looked toward the city skyline beyond the windows. "Then you crashed into my life screaming about cereal soup during a live stream and accidentally ruined all of it." Julian groaned immediately. "Please do not make that my legacy." Adrian laughed softly under his breath. "Real again. Warm again. Too late." Julian's heartbeat stumbled embarrassingly hard. Adrian stepped closer then. Not enough to overwhelm him. Just enough for Julian to feel safe instead of distant. "You asked me once why I watched your streams," Adrian said quietly. Julian looked up slowly. Adrian's gray eyes held his steadily now without hesitation. "It was because you were the first person online who sounded honest." Something painful and warm twisted inside Julian's chest. Adrian continued softly. "You laughed too loudly. You panicked openly. You cared about people without pretending not to." A faint smile touched his mouth. "You felt real." Julian swallowed hard. "Adrian. And after meeting you," Adrian admitted quietly, "I realized I did not want distance anymore." Silence wrapped around them gently, while morning light painted gold across the kitchen floor. Julian looked at him for a long moment before laughing softly through the emotion building in his throat. "You know this is insane, right?" Adrian tilted his head slightly. "Which part?" "The part where my internet crush turned out to be a lonely billionaire heir who secretly watched my streams for years." Adrian looked almost amused now. "That does sound improbable." Julian smiled helplessly despite himself. Then Adrian reached for his hand carefully, like he was still giving Julian the chance to pull away if he wanted to. Julian did not pull away. Adrian's fingers threaded softly through his instead. Warm, steady, real. The board still wants us to sign a formal public relationship agreement, Adrian admitted after a moment. Julian groaned dramatically. That is the least romantic sentence ever spoken. Adrian's eyes softened. Then we will change the terms. Julian blinked. What? Adrian squeezed his hand gently once. No fake clauses. No expiration dates. No scripted appearances. His voice lowered quietly. Only if you want something real too. Julian stared at him beneath the warm morning sunlight, feeling like the entire terrifying week had somehow led directly to this exact moment. Safe. Honest. Chosen. Finally, slowly, he smiled. Okay, he whispered. Adrian looked at him carefully. Okay. Julian stepped closer until their shoulders brushed lightly together beside the kitchen island. I think, he admitted softly, I would like to ruin your life a little more permanently. Adrian laughed quietly against the sunlight spilling between them, and for the first time since the entire world exploded around them, everything finally felt calm.